This is Hannah Nordby, and I am the Area 5 Program Coordinator for Conservation Leadership and Planning with NDSU Extension, and I will be discussing how to give effective feedback on today's micro lesson. Now, we have a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time. What we will be covering in this micro lesson includes why feedback is important, who should be giving feedback, acknowledging the challenges often associated with feedback, and providing general tips and tricks to address some of those most common challenges. Big picture, why is feedback important and why am I recording a whole micro lesson on it? Feedback provides an opportunity to clarify and set expectations of the job to be done. Continuously providing feedback helps to ensure that these shared expectations are being met as time goes on. Giving feedback builds employee confidence that they are headed in the right direction, which is especially important for newer employees. Giving feedback provides a formal opportunity for dialogue and tracking that feedback has been provided if issues arise later on, which protects both employees and supervisors. Now, who should be giving feedback? Yes, supervisors, it is part of your responsibilities to provide feedback to your employees to ensure that the SCD is focusing its efforts on local priorities and needs. Employees, you're not off the hook though either. If you need clear feedback and direction, it is 100% okay to ask for that. And I'll have a few tips later on about how you can frame questions to receive effective feedback. Let's talk about some of the challenges and why giving feedback is hard. Often, what I see as a program coordinator observing annual reviews is supervisors saying, "Oh, you're just doing such a fabulous job. Don't change anything. We're just so glad that you're here." And moving on because we don't feel familiar enough with what the employee is doing. We don't know when to give that feedback, if hiccups do arise, and we often don't know how to give that feedback. We're going to move into this next section of this micro lesson where we're going to take time to recognize and address each of these very, very real challenges and provide some solutions. Let's start with the challenge of not knowing when to give feedback. Immediately is best. Don't wait to give feedback. Address things as they pop up to avoid small things turning into big things. Additionally, it's easy to forget that things were an issue if you wait a few months or even until the end of the year to bring up concerns. It's also important to take time on a monthly or quarterly basis to reflect after important seasons or events. A few examples could be taking time for feedback and reflection after tree planting season. Did you have enough tree help? How did managing that tree crew go? Are there adjustments that need to be made before next tree planting season? Okay, taking time to provide feedback and reflection after an educational event. Once again, what went well? What didn't go so well? How was the event organized? Did you get the turnout that you wanted to? Was the topic on track with the needs of the community? Just a few examples of things that you could reflect upon after an educational event. And finally, after you've implemented a policy change, taking time a few months later to discuss how is that policy being received? Are there adjustments that need to be made or tweaks? You can also, and I would encourage SCDs to continually be providing feedback on an annual basis. What I would encourage, though, is to use those annual reviews as a time to discuss overarching goals and aspirations of both employees and the Soil Conservation District. Another challenge is not feeling familiar enough with what our employee does to give effective and relevant feedback. Don't worry, as you can see, I have tons of suggestions to help folks overcome this challenge. Starting with employees, how can we help supervisors become more familiar with our daily work? We can share highlights from the last month during board meetings. We can complete and share a self evaluation form with supervisors. And some of those example forms can be found on our SCD Resources Google Drive. I'll point them out later. Or we can simply ask for honest feedback and try to encourage those supervisors that we are looking for that feedback. Supervisors, what can we do? We can attend educational events that the Soil Conservation District is hosting, whether that be adult education or youth education. We can become involved with planning SCD events, whether that's being on the committee or showing up at events to help with setup and so on. And it's especially nice when you can pair an event that aligns with your personal interest. It just makes things a little bit more relevant for everyone. Okay. We can also take a day to help with tree planting or help with the annual tree sale. We can go water sampling. Sometimes it's as simple as stopping by the office when we're in town to say hi and check in. And if you can't stop by in person, sending a text or calling to connect with our employees is important. And regardless of how we are becoming familiar with the work that our employee does, it's important that we're asking questions and being curious along the way. Now, there are also things that we can do as supervisors and employees to help each other become more familiar with our roles and responsibilities and day to day activities. We can host a locally led meeting to identify needs and priorities. We can create an annual plan of work. We can review a feedback form and discuss the questions and responses. Or you can also ask an area coordinator to come help facilitate these conversations or create resources that would meet the needs of your SCD. Now, another challenge is not knowing how to give feedback. First and foremost, giving effective feedback starts with developing a relationship and rapport with our employees. Taking the time to get to know your employee and becoming familiar with the work that they do is extremely important. Again, I'll remind you to refer to the previous slide and how you can develop that rapport. Once it is developed, though, I want you to remember when it comes to giving feedback that if I tell you your work is terrible, you're going to get defensive. No, duh, Hannah, right? If I tell you that your work is great, you're going to get complacent. If I tell you, here's a specific thing I liked about your work, you're going to try to repeat that thing. If I tell you respectfully there's something I didn't like, you're going to try and fix it. So, how do we go about giving that negative feedback? There's a few approaches. One approach is, who's heard of the sandwich method? I'm imagining a few people raising their hand right now or nodding their head. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, I'll explain. The sandwich method of giving a feedback is you tell someone something good they did, something that they need to work on, and then wrap up with something else that they did good. Now, this method isn't terrible, and it's certainly better than just saying, "Oh, that was great. Don't change anything." However, I want to challenge each of you to shift your mindset when it comes to feedback from worrying about encouraging versus discouraging feedback, and instead focus on giving feedback that helps your employee expand on their strengths and overcome their weaknesses. Doesn't that sound a lot more empowering? Now, we might be thinking, that's all fine and dandy, Hannah, to shift our mindset when it comes to giving feedback. But how exactly do we give negative feedback in a way that doesn't make people get defensive and instead encourages them to fix things? It all starts with why. Why am I giving you this feedback? It could be because I believe in your potential and I want to help you grow. Okay? Asking this question of what do I want to accomplish in this conversation? Okay? So what I want to accomplish in this micro lesson is to build trust and rapport and to help you succeed in your position. I also should take a moment to clarify what I don't want. So, what I don't want as a result of this conversation is for either of us to get defensive or feel attacked. If these emotions come up, please let me know and we can pause and take a moment to clarify things or just take a break in the conversation. Okay, and you should use the word and to to connect these two statements of clarifying why you are having this conversation and your intent, along with what you don't want to come out of this conversation. So, for example, to tie things together, supervisors listening. I am recording this micro lesson on giving effective feedback because I know you are passionate about conservation, you care about your employees and community, and are striving to fulfill your duties as a supervisor to the best of your abilities. Now, my tough love is that more often than not, SCD employees don't receive helpful or effective feedback from their supervisors. To do your job justice, you need to give more effective feedback to your employees. And I believe that each and every one of you are capable of doing that. I know that giving feedback is challenging and feels a little touchy-feely, for lack of better words. And I don't want you to feel like this micro lesson is a waste of time. I intentionally developed the presentation trying to keep things real world. And I really hope that you take the following tips and tricks I have to share to heart. How did you receive that feedback from me? Are you annoyed? Are you pissed off? Or are you digesting the fact that this is an area that many supervisors have room to grow it in? Think about that. I'm going to change gears slightly from tips to giving better feedback to how to ask for better feedback. Humor me for a moment and consider this question. After watching this micro lesson, what feedback do you have for me? Okay, let me reframe that. What advice do you have for the next micro lesson that I record? Or what is one thing that I could do better next time? Which question was easiest for you to answer? Okay, now let's also consider which question frames things in a way where it is easier for me to receive your feedback. I know that I personally am always open to advice because I know there's room for growth and I really appreciate the perspective from folks that are in the real world doing the real world thing, and I want to make sure that my education and the resources I create is helpful. And so when I'm asking for advice, I really take that to heart. So it's sometimes just those little things that make the big difference when asking for feedback. Now, remember, when giving feedback, we don't want cheerleaders or critics, we want coaches. As I work towards wrapping things up, I wanted to share a few additional resources with you. You can go ahead and scan these QR codes to access these resources. The first one I want to highlight is that we recorded an Empowering Performance Reviews podcast episode last winter, and it's very real world and relatable. Definitely give that one a listen. There's lots of printable resources on the SCD Resources Google Drive, and another online resource that is helpful is the HR Collaborative. It has professional resources available, and I would encourage you to reach out and connect with that organization. We covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. We discussed how feedback is important to clarify if employees are meeting expectations and the SCD is headed in the right direction. Supervisors and employees both have a responsibility in asking for and giving effective feedback. We addressed several common challenges associated with giving feedback and several tips and tricks to overcome those challenges. In closing, I will leave you with this last question. Who do you trust more? The person that always says, "Oh, that was great. Don't change anything." Or the person you can count on to consistently give kind, honest, and constructive feedback? I know which one I would trust more, and it's the one that's going to give me constructive feedback in a kind way. In closing, this is our conservation, leadership, and planning team. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or are needing support in some form or fashion. I would also encourage you to reach out to me if you have some advice for future micro lessons. Have a great day, everyone.